Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about two verbs in Spanish, the verb ser and the verb estar. Both of these verbs in Spanish are translated to English as to be. This is a tricky situation for people who grew up just speaking English because we only have one verb in English which means to be, and that's to be. But in Spanish we actually have two different verbs which can be translated this way. We have the verb ser and we have the verb estar. And the tricky part about this is that you can't just wake up in the morning and pick and choose which one you're going to use. You can't say, oh, this is going to be a ser day or this is going to be an estar day. You actually have to understand when we use the verb ser, to mean to be, and when we use the verb estar. In this video, we're going to review the conjugations of ser and estar, and then we're going to talk about when we use the verb ser instead of estar, and when we use the verb estar instead of the verb ser. At the end of this video, you should be able to give some reasons for each. All right, let's take a look at the verb ser to start off with. The verb ser, as we just said, means to be, and is a verb we've been using most of the year, as you'll see in just a moment. When we conjugate ser, if you want to say I am, you say yo soy, tú eres, él es, he is, she is, it is, somos, we are, son, they are, soy, eres, es, somos, son. As you see, we've been using these words a lot this year, so ser is one of the most used verbs we've seen thus far in Spanish. Soy, eres, es, somos, son. The verb estar is one that we've seen more recently, but it's one that's used no less frequently. The verb estar is conjugated this way. Yo estoy, I am. Estás, you are. Está, he is, she is, or it is. Estamos means we are, and están means they are. Notice that estás, está, and están all have accent marks over the A because we put the stress there. Estoy, estás, está, estamos, están. So that's your conjugation of the verb estar. Now then, as we said, the tricky thing is you have to understand when we use the verb ser and when we use the verb estar. When do I say soy? When do I say estoy? When do I say somos? When do I say estamos? And that's what we're going to be looking at in the rest of this video. Basically, we use the verb ser to mean to be when we're talking about the nature of something. That is to say, what something or someone is like. That could be things having to do with their identity, what they look like, their personality, things like that. We're going to take a look at it a little bit closer at specific instances, but remember, all these have to do with describing what someone or something is like, describing its nature. So, we use ser instead of the verb estar, for example, to talk about physical characteristics, what someone or something looks like. We could say, mi padre es muy alto. Es comes from the verb ser. My father is very tall. We're talking about what he's like. If you had to identify my father, you could say he's the tall one. Mi padre es muy alto. My father is very tall. Another example is you could say Elena, Enrique son morenos. Elena and Enrique are dark-skinned. Son comes from the verb ser. Again, when you're talking about physical characteristics, you're talking about the nature of something. So Elena and Enrique son morenos, we're going to use ser there, not estar. So for physical characteristics, we're going to use ser. Also for personality traits, describing what someone is like on the inside. It also has to do with what they're like, their nature. Nosotros somos inteligentes. We are intelligent. Here we're using somos, which is a form of ser, because we're talking about ourselves being smart. Again, that's describing what we're like. Nosotros somos inteligentes. Another example. Tú no quieres ser tímida. Tú no quieres ser tímida. We're using the verb ser here. You don't want to be shy. Again, we're talking about a characteristic of one's personality, what their nature is like. Tú no quieres ser tímida. So for physical characteristics, we use ser. For personality traits, we use ser. A third circumstance is talking about someone's point of origin, where someone or something is from. This is one of the first questions you ever asked each other in Spanish, and that was de donde eres? Where are you from? Notice we use eres. Again, it's a form of ser. De donde eres? Where are you from? One way you could answer that question, soy de San Juan, Puerto Rico. I am from San Juan. Notice again, we're saying soy, the yo form of ser, because you're talking about someone's point of origin, where he or she is from. In this case, I'm from San Juan. That says a lot about who I am. That's something, a permanent, long-lasting characteristic. I may be somewhere else later on in life, but I will always be from San Juan, and that's a little bit of who I am. So, physical characteristics, personality traits, point of origin, all of those have to do with ser. Also, one last category we're going to touch on today is what I call identity, talking about who someone is. That could be a number of different things. For example, Manolo es estudiante. Manolo is a student. We're using es here because we're saying what he is, who or what he is, what's his role, what's his occupation. He's a student. I could say yo soy maestro. I am a teacher. I would use soy there because I'm talking about what I am. I'm identifying myself, what I am. Marta y yo somos colombianos. Marta and I are Colombian. Here, I'm using somos because we talk about nationality. Nationality, what category we belong to, again, says a lot about who or what we are. La familia es budista. The family is Buddhist. One's religion also has a lot to do with identity. So we're going to use the verb ser here. Es comes from the verb ser. We're not going to say está budista. We're going to say es budista. One last example. Eduardo es el primo de Josefa. Eduardo is Josefa's cousin. We're using es again because we're talking about the role he plays. He is Josefa's cousin. That identifies Eduardo. So in short, again, we're going to use the verb ser to talk about anything having to do with the nature of somebody. What someone is like, who somebody is. Physical characteristics, personality traits, point of origin, identity, all will be using the verb ser. In contrast, the verb estar, rather than talking about the nature of something, what someone is like, who somebody is, ser is going to be used to describe the conditions or circumstances that somebody or someone is in. Not what they're like, but a situation in which he finds himself, or a situation in which, as a condition that something is under. Let's look again at some specific examples. We're going to use the verb ser instead of the verb estar in this case to talk about feelings and health. When you're talking about how you're feeling, when you're talking, whether that be your sickness or health, or whether you're talking about emotions, you're going to use the verb estar because our emotions don't generally describe who we are, it just describes the situation we're under. For example, another question you learn to ask each other early on is, ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás hoy? How are you today? In this case, I'm not asking what you're like, I'm asking how you're feeling. Your emotions change from moment to moment. You can be sick today, you can be healthy tomorrow. It doesn't describe who we are, it just describes, again, our feelings or our health. Yo estoy bastante mal would be a way to answer that. Yo estoy bastante mal. I am quite poor today. Again, estar, talking about feelings. Present location is one that we've already looked at in this class, but let's take another look at it again. As we said, you use the verb estar for where things are. ¿Dónde están ustedes? Where are you all? Where are you all? Where someone is doesn't say a lot about what they're like. I could be at the mall today. I could be at the doctor's office tomorrow. I could be at school the next day. That doesn't say anything about what I'm like, just what circumstance I'm in. For example, I would say, estamos en el cine. We are at the movie theater. Estamos en el cine. We use estar for where things are. One last category would be, after talking about Cuba está en el Caribe, Cuba's in the Caribbean, even it doesn't say anything about what Cuba's like. That doesn't say whether it's big, small, whether it's populated heavily or anything. It's just describing where it is. Present location, we use the verb estar. Lastly, present characteristics, describing a situation or an appearance of something right now. For example, la sopa está muy caliente. The soup is very hot. Now, if we wait 20, 30 minutes, that soup is still going to be soup. It's still going to be the same kind of soup. It's just going to be less hot. It's going to be cold. But so caliente, temperature, is more or less a description of a particular condition it's in. The soup isn't hot by its very nature. It just happens to be hot at this moment. In the same way, you can say, tú estás muy bonita hoy. You are very pretty today. Now then, in this case, it seems to go against what we said, that physical characteristics go with the verb ser. Here, we're not talking about you being pretty in the sense of you're always pretty. This, in the case, is talking about how you appear to me today. You may be especially pretty today, or you may be pretty out of the ordinary. In any case, what you're saying is at this moment, your appearance is very pretty. Tú estás muy bonita. All right. So again, we use the verb estar to talk about conditions or circumstances that something is in, whereas with ser, we talk about the nature of something, who someone is, what something's like. Again, we use ser for physical characteristics, personality traits, point of origin, and identity. We use estar when we talk about feelings and health, where something is right now, its present location, and also present characteristics and circumstances. So, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to review this video as many times as necessary to grasp these concepts, take notes, and choose the right verb here to make each sentence correct. The verb on the left is a form of ser, and the verb on the right is a form of estar. I want you to read carefully each sentence, and I want you to decide when we're going to use the verb ser and when we're going to use the verb estar.